I never realised the impact of what owning my own woodland would have on me. I've always had a passion for the outdoors and spending time in the woods, but having worked so hard to finally be able to call this woodland my home has changed my life beyond what I could ever imagine. Since owning this woodland, I've learnt so much about the interconnecting relationship between trees, wildlife, and how much our ancestors would have relied upon these areas for their everyday living. My journey into looking after my own woodland has only just begun, and I hope that you will join me on this new adventure and get to learn with me along the way. Having now owned my woodland for a few months, I feel like I'm starting to understand it more. The way it looks through the changing seasons, and what wildlife live amongst the trees and shrubs. In the previous episode, I took time away from any form of working tasks that I wanted to do, and I simply spent the night camping there with a canvas tent and a wood stove. It was incredible to hear the owls hooting at night and listen to the crunch of the leaves as deer walked right past my tent, browsing on the last of the remaining shrubs. It was a special night, and hopefully the first of many. But now, in episode 3, I needed to focus on a few important tasks, one of which is to ensure that any dangerous looking dead trees are safely managed in the most sustainable way possible. Some, like this widowmaker, which is leaning across a natural path that I walk through my woods, will need to be felled properly and safely. This is a task far beyond my skill set, and so for this, I have help from a professional. But we will go into more detail on this later in the episode. For now, I wanted to create a small, temporary camp, where I can have an area to keep dry, cook food, and relax amongst the trees. My woodland consists of 2 main areas. One of them is the open woodland with large, mature beech trees. This area will need very little management, as beech trees cast such a big shadow that not many ground shrubs and trees can grow underneath it, holly being one of the exceptions in this area. The other area is full of fairly mature and unmanaged hazel, with some larger ash trees, including the giant ash tree which lays across the middle of it. I figured that as there has been a lot of deadfall, and hazel is an area that generally needs a bit of management, this would be the main part of my woodland where I would be looking to manage. The ash trees are all suffering from ash dieback, and so sadly, these will likely fall down over the next few years. This is the area of my woodland that will change the most over the years, even without any intervention. And so this is the area that I will build my temporary bodger's camp. For those wondering, a bodger, or bodging, is a traditional woodland craft which involves using green unseasoned wood to craft various items such as chairs, furniture, cooking utensils and more. Traditionally, a bodger is a labourer who would live and work in the forest. If you needed a chair made, you would visit the local bodger in the woodland and he would make one for you from green wood. In Britain, over 100 years ago, bodgers were very common, and now they are beginning to make a resurgence. Part of my objectives for this woods is to bring back some of the traditional crafts of Britain, and so for now I am building a temporary bodger's camp, which I might make more permanent down the line. Bodgers were incredibly good at their craft. They worked with green wood on a daily basis and could create all manner of handy things. While spending time in this area, I couldn't help but keep looking at the large ash tree lying there in the woods. Whilst I feel the majestic presence of this fallen tree makes this part of the woodland look so wild, I couldn't help but think that my ancestors would have been looking at this in a different way. They would have seen it as an amazing resource. The tip of the tree branches would have made great firewood. Bow makers would have used sections for making bows. A tool maker would see an important resource for his tool handles. Furniture makers would see ideal hardwood for tabletops, worktops, staircases and so much more. And so I wanted to see just what I could make in just a few hours with just one tiny section of this magnificent tree. My plans for this tree will be explained more in the next episode, but for now at least, despite this tree having lost its life to ash dieback, at least I can begin to bring new life from it. This tiny coffee scoop is just the beginning, and whilst I'm no professional spoon carver, I will carry this scoop with pride, and know that whenever I use it to scoop out those fresh coffee grounds, I will always know that it was the first item I ever made from my woodland, and I will always remember the tree that gave it life. Getting a bit chilly now, so I'll put the wool hat on, but I've just been messing around in the camp really, and I had a little go at carving some of the ash. Well, really this is more for firewood. I've just got it stacked here temporarily from when I was cutting it a few weeks ago, just letting it kind of dry. It will get wet and dry, and over time I'll get a little log store built and maybe, well, put it in some shelter and let it dry with the airflow. For now it's a bit exposed, but that's fine because it's been exposed already. But I was just making a little coffee scoop. I'm not an expert carver by no means, guys. So yeah, just spending a few hours here in the woods really, and just taking it all in, not trying to rush anything too much. And just, yeah, that was from a piece of, really a piece like this, kind of that diameter. I just chipped off the edge of the bark to begin with a little carving hatchet, and I don't need much wood to be able to carve something as small as this. But to be honest, it was quite hard because this wood is fairly, I think this ash tree's been down a long time, but as a result of that the wood was actually really quite hard to carve. It's just really dry and brittle, so I'm hoping this doesn't crack too much. But this is where I've got so far. This is not the final piece, I still need to sand it quite a bit more. And then I need to oil it as well. But like I said, I'm not an expert carver, but this is just a little coffee scoop, and it's nice to know that whatever I do decide to do with this ash tree, whether to leave it here or to do something with the trunk and mill it up, there'll always be a part of that ash tree that will kind of live on. And I know it sounds a bit nerdy or a bit sort of soppy, but it's, you know, it's part of my ethos is to try and keep things going in this woodland as much as possible and make it as sustainable as possible, and try and utilise all those resources as my ancestors would have done years ago. You know, we live in a world, in a society where everything's really easy to get. You know, you can buy things with the click of a button. You can turn on a tap and get hot or cold water. And, you know, our ancestors had it a lot harder, and I think they valued the resources around them they had a lot more. You know, how many times do people sort of walk through the woods and with their heads down looking at their feet are not really, or on their phone, not really taking in what's around them and looking at all these resources. And as I've got into bushcraft over the years, and just gone more and more into that path, it becomes more, you look at the world in a different light to other people who are not so much into that side of things, bushcraft and nature and things. And I don't just see, trees and leaves on the floor. I see resources, I see what type of tree it is, what I can make from that. I think that's the way I've kind of always been, but it's almost been enhanced now that I'm getting into the world of woodland management. And so, yeah, that's what I've done. Little coffee scoop. You might see this in videos in the future, and I'm looking forward to carving other things and making other things from this ash tree behind me. This tiny little coffee scoop has come from this beautiful big ash tree, which has sadly died from ash dieback, but the tree will live on. Thank you, tree, for providing me with a lovely little coffee scoop, which I shall use and remember you by over the years. Thank you. So this is what makes me think that the ash tree has been down for quite a few years. You can see the cuts that I've made recently, just here and here where I've been working on it. What I've noticed is down here near the tip of the ash tree, which has wiped out this hazel tree here, you can see that's the trunk. The hazel tree's been totally flattened. But here, growing straight at a right angle from the trunk, is some hazel. Still got leaves on, so it's still living. And judging by the diameter, I would say that's probably, well, I'm going with a couple years old. Definitely over a year old. Probably a couple of years. And so that's what makes me think. You can see all the rods, the hazel rods coming up there. That's what makes me think this ash tree has been down for quite a while. And there's me thinking it was sort of fairly recently, but I definitely think it's been over a year, maybe a couple of years, judging by this hazel is 8 feet tall, this little one. So this is just temporary camp here. I've just rigged up a tarp, and that's going to stay up for a few months now, temporarily, like I say. We've made a little fire pit so I can get some cooking things done, so I can keep out of the rain, do some cooking, hopefully get some carving down the line. I've got some pot hangers which I've carved up as well, and these are different heights if I want to use different kind of kettles. I might get an even smaller one if I'm going to cook on a Dutch oven. That's just on a little kind of spit. And the reason being is that I feel like this is the area of my woodland, obviously with the ash tree there, where I will be doing kind of most of the management. There's lots of blown down hazel all around here, and some of it's I'll leave on the floor, but other bits I'm going to use for other projects. And the other thing about this area of my woodland is that there's loads of ash trees. All the ash trees in my woodland are in this particular spot. I don't know how many I've got, I can't remember now, but it's over 10 or so. And they've all sadly are suffering from ash dieback. So at some point, it could be in a couple of weeks, it could be in a couple of months, it might be in a few years. But at some point, they're all going to come down like the ash tree over here, which is really sad. But at the same time, this part of my woodland is probably going to have the most drastic change over the shortest period of time, even without my intervention. With those big ash trees coming down, there's going to be so much light coming through, and there's going to be so much more of this kind of ground flora coming up, and so the site is going to change in that sense. And I figure if I'm going to manage and focus on an area of the woodland, I don't want to just manage my whole woodland and just make everything look clean and immaculate. That's not my goal here. I'm focusing on little areas, and that way I feel if I make any big decisions on things, then it will only impact that smaller area of my woodland and not the entire thing. So really, yeah, this is the section of the woodland that's gonna, well, it's already changed so much from windfall, and you can see just the wind from the storm damage that's been done. So I'm going to use some of the resources here, keep it all in the woodland, but use it here and hopefully show you guys some more projects in the future. But this is temporary camp, and that's the point. I'm making a kind of bodgers camp where I can do some carving and make things and craft things for workshop style things that will help me in the future to make other things. So it's all a journey. This is a chronological series, my woodland life. And if you want to follow along, then I'll put a link to the playlist in the description. If not, just type in TA Outdoors Woodland Life on YouTube and you should pop up. But each episode will follow along on my journey throughout this management, this woodland life, really. My life of owning a woodland from the very first day that I bought it, or the very first video that I showed you, to wherever it leads me down the line. It's all a journey that I'm sure will change over time. Whilst there are many skills and crafts that I can practice in my woodland with little to no experience, there are some tasks that are simply well beyond my skill set, and one of those is climbing up trees with a chainsaw. I am fortunate in that the majority of my woodland has pretty healthy trees. Aside from the ash trees being affected from dieback, the only real trees I have concern about are those that are dead standing with the potential to blow down, and those that are widowmakers, which have already part fallen and could fall at any time. The reason why these concern me is that I spend a lot of time in my woodland, and I will be camping often in these woods. Therefore, I need to make sure that I am safe and reduce the chance of any trees causing me or my family any serious injury. And so I sought the help of a friend of mine called Ryan, who is a professional tree surgeon and has worked in forestry management for nearly 2 decades. Ryan has all of the qualifications, insurance and skills to fell trees in a safe manner. But not only this, he is passionate about woodworking, bushcraft, and he even enjoys wild camping. His knowledge of trees and woodland management is second to none, and so it was great for me to be able to learn from him and watch how he deals with managing the difficult tasks such as widowmakers and dead standing trees. For anyone who is a woodland owner or who has recently bought a woodland, having a professional tree surgeon help you with some of the management tasks is something that I highly recommend. Not only will you learn about your woodland from a different angle, but you will be able to appreciate just how skilled a tree surgeon can be. Each cut is done with precision, and often they can fell trees in a particular direction, or process them up into segments that you might need for woodworking. I know a fair amount about bushcraft, and the various uses of different natural materials, but what I learnt from Ryan was more about tree management, looking at a woodland as a whole, and how to keep it healthy and encourage new growth. Before he did any work, Ryan made a short visit to the woodland to take a look at the trees and what tools and equipment he might need. A few weeks later, Ryan came back to the woods, this time fully loaded with his equipment, and he began to work on some of the trees that needed to be managed and made safe. To begin with, he started on a fairly large dead oak branch, which was overhanging on one of the natural paths I used to walk through the woods with my family. The first piece of equipment Ryan brought out was a giant catapult, and I have to admit, the inner child in me certainly wanted to take over and use it. But alas, I did manage to resist. So essentially that is to fire, what, like a leading rope?
Basically, yeah, this is just a weighted bag on a little thin line that goes up in the tree, and then I can feed my rope with that.
Oh right, okay.
I don't need to be up particularly high to do this, because we've got enough space. We can just drop.
I was in awe at some of the technical equipment and gadgets that Ryan had, and it shows how far we have come in the tree felling industry.
Just a little CT.
So that's how you get the each time you go up with your foot?
Yeah, so this, because I'm not spiking, this is just mainly just a help to ascend the rope. What I do in a minute, if you've got a hand free, I'll get you to hold that bottom bit of the rope down.
Just to hold it tight straight?
Yeah.
Oh, I see, so your foot, it locks each time?
Yeah, until I get a bit of weight in the rope.
No.
And then it means that you can...
Oh, I just get the slack coming down, yeah.
That should be enough now.
Awesome.
So yeah, it just gives enough weight in the rope for me to use my leg to ascend rather than my arms.
Yeah.
And that basically means that I can do this for longer.
Watching Ryan climb the rope, with a chainsaw dangling from his hip and carabiners everywhere, made me realise just how much he has to think about during his day-to-day work. From my perspective, it all seemed quite complicated, but for Ryan, this is a way of life for him. He made it look so easy. For the majority of the work that he does high up in the trees, Ryan uses a small top-handled chainsaw. Once the oak branch was on the forest floor, Ryan cut it into small segments.
Did you want that out as well, or just happy to leave that as standing?
I tell you what, it would benefit being on the forest floor, to be honest. Yeah, I'd let it rot on the floor if you're able to.
And I decided that it would be best to move it from the path and leave it to decompose naturally where it was left. It will be an important habitat for invertebrates and fungi for the years to come. Now it was on to the one and only dead standing beech tree in my woodland.
So Ryan, we've got a beech tree here. I've been looking at the bark and it doesn't look too healthy, but there's no sort of canopy or branches on the top, is there? It's pretty dead. What do you think is the best option here?
So yeah, totally right. So yeah, a lot of the bark and stuff has come off of this because it's been dead a little while. Most of the branches have already broken off the top, and just sort of what I think we'll do is we'll try and reduce this down to just a single stem monolith. Just take all that sail and weight out the top, just to sort of negate the risk of it falling over and causing sort of further damage to the trees around, or sort of people walking underneath, really. And
that still gives that still helps in terms of habitat for owls and things like that. Just
retains a decent bit of habitat, and just sort of, as I say, just gets rid of that risk of it coming over completely and sort of harming somebody or something else.
Sure, yeah, that would be quite a hefty branch. If that top section came down, it looks, pretty heavy, doesn't it? So it would do some damage, but at the same time, if we can, monolith it like you say, we still get the benefit of habitat up there for the birds of prey, really.
Yeah, definitely.
This is, Dad, you could use that for your ground bait, couldn't you?
That one, yeah. I'd be fishing in Spain.
He decided to climb up the tree that was adjacent to the dead standing one. That way, when he gets high enough, he can swing across at the right height, and if he falls off the dead standing tree, he is secured by the living tree next to it. I have to admit that at first glance I felt that this dead standing beech tree actually looked pretty solid, and perhaps didn't really need the top chopped off at all. But Ryan assured me that the top would be dangerously rotten and could fall off at any time. Lo and behold, when the top of the tree came crashing down, it disintegrated into pulp, proving it to be very rotten. From here, Ryan then moved on down the tree, cutting it in segments, until he got to the lower joints of the tree, where he could find that the wood was much less rotten, and therefore could be left as habitat for birds of prey. Perhaps down the line, I might make an owl box to go on this monolith beech tree.
It's easier coming down than going up. Yeah.
So Ryan has just turned that beech tree basically into a monolith. It's now dead standing, but he's given it a good shake, and he's said that that's going to probably last quite a few years. I think down the line I might put an owl box or something up near the top of it, it's already a bit of habitat anyway for those kind of birds of prey. But we were just saying the top of the branch is where it obviously gets the most moisture, and you can see how punky and rotten that was. So this is all great stuff to go back to nature and help increase the biodiversity for decomposers and things like that. Obviously I tend to walk through this bit, but I'm happy enough to just put those down there, those little bits, and just leave them be. I mean, look, that stake, look at that. It's gone into the ground. We have to keep clear, but do you know what I mean? And some of it I will use for dead hedging on my border and my boundary around there. You know, the straight bits like that, I'll just go and put over there and leave a natural kind of dead hedge over that way. But these bits here, I'll just show you. You can see that these black lines here, this is the wood, this is called spalting, and it leaves a really nice pattern. That's evidence that the wood is dying, but at the same time, this is perfect wood for carving now. This is a pretty big log, this, to be honest, so it's great firewood as well as being great carving wood. So I'll probably actually utilise this part of the tree, which isn't too bad, for something down the line, whether it be firewood, whether it be some carving projects or things like that. But that's actually, to me, seems really decent compared to, you know, the stuff that's rotting away. But this is all new to me in terms of the woodland management side of things, but it just shows that you can get resources from pretty much any part of the tree, and you're still helping your woodland, even with that being on the floor, whether it's still in the tree and it's dead standing. It's habitat for birds of prey and things like that, but when it blows down, or you kind of cut it down like we've done today, then it goes onto the forest floor, and that's going to feed back increase the biodiversity for invertebrates and things like that, bugs, fungi over time. That, you know, that will all encourage that. So it's all part of the woodland management process. It's exciting stuff. So this one again, Ryan, we're just going to monolith it. You can see it's pretty rotten. Yeah, it's pretty rotten, but the base seems fine. I mean, it's not very high, and there's not massive amount of weight on it, so I think this is going to be safe enough just to quickly run up. I know it looks quite drastic because obviously the bark's coming off, but this goes pretty damn solid in here. And I think this is just one that's had the top break out historically, and then has just died off through shading and so on and so forth. So I think the base of it will be fairly solid, but we're just going to get that sort of the bit off the top that's a little bit sort of precarious, just to try and retain it a little bit longer. And from a woodland management kind of perspective, from my perspective anyway, where obviously I'm interested in trying to maintain as much biodiversity as possible, by doing this monolith method, you're not kind of clear felling the tree from the bottom. You're leaving half of it almost dead standing, and then half of it falls down on the forest floor, and then you're encouraging obviously habitat for up high in the canopy. Really. And then you've got the biodiversity on the ground. So it's quite a good method.
After the dead standing trees had been made safe, it was then on to the widowmaker, which was the tree that I had most concern about.
So this is one of probably the most important trees that I needed Ryan's help with, and it's one of these oak trees. It's coming down over a kind of small path that I tend to use coming in and out of the woodland, so essentially it is now a widowmaker for sure. It's quite dangerously propped up against another oak tree. I'm really interested to see how Ryan kind of approaches this, because I wouldn't know where to make any cut. It's not like it's a straight tree where things would be more straightforward. It's totally at pretty much a 45-degree angle. So it'd be really interesting to see the kind of technique of how to get this tree down. Yeah, looking forward to it. And this, I think we've got some uses for this one in terms of maybe cutting it up into smaller sections, because it actually looks quite healthy. So you know, part of it might be used for some good bushcraft projects and stuff down the line. So we'll see. But exciting times. We'll see what this one, how we're going to get this one down. It looks like a different rope. This is just a little. This is just a little whippy sling that goes around the tree. It's just a different friction thing. Somebody at the yard has decided to tie it up into a Gordian knot at the moment. Nice and bright. Yeah. Oh, it doubled. It goes hold that on the stem. So it's somewhere there. Which way does this have to go? Round and through, or? Should be one that goes
And this is just a different kind of webbing that once the ropes pass through it, it goes loose, and then once you take the flap up, it comes back through, and then you can pull this tail through, and it just cinches it nice and tight on the stem. Like it just there. Basically, the rope will come up to me, and then coming down the trunk, we'll chuck a loop through, and then over that little peg, and then that wrap round, and that will take some tension. Yeah. So what I'll do is I'll get you to either do one wrap, which will be like that, or maybe 2 wraps, just to hold it nice and taut. And then when that's nice and tensioned up, just lowering that should allow the friction. The friction basically just stop it from going anywhere.
And that's for lowering a big piece down the tree.
Yeah.
Ryan began work on taking off any protruding limbs from the widowmaker, so that he could have a straight tree trunk to work with. Then Dad and I helped set up the stainless steel flying capstan, which is used as a safety device to give control when lowering large tree trunks, and also helps to keep Ryan safe whilst working up high in the tree. It was really interesting to see this device in action, and it's quite amazing how much weight it can take.
You're holding a whole tree, Dad.
50-ton tree. Let's go.
No pressure. You're just lowering it, yeah?
Look at this moving. Don't be going with a
that's
snatch.
lowering the whole tree.
It's on something, and
it's hung up.
Before Ryan made the final felling cut, we needed to clear out any small hazel trees underneath it that would likely hold it up as it falls. Ryan then needed his larger chainsaw, and so he lowered down the small climbing saw, and we clipped on the large one, which he could then pull up.
Chuck my other little one right out the way as well, because I'll squash that other one, I think.
We used the offcuts of some of the trunk of the oak that Ryan had cut further up to use as a platform for the widowmaker to fall on. That way, when it falls, it should hopefully land on these oak rounds and be kept off the ground. This will then make it easier for Ryan to cut into segments.
Let that come down.
It worked! Nice!
Always work.
That was perfect!
That yellow rope can come back through and go back in the bag.
Definitely doesn't look rotten at all. Too much. It's all good wood.
One of the great things about having Ryan there with his chainsaws is that even when the tree is felled, he can cut segments of the tree into usable pieces of wood for various woodworking and bushcraft projects. I politely asked him if he would be able to cut me off a section of log around 3 feet long and turn it into a rectangle. This would save me many hours of hewing it with an axe, and as he already had the equipment on him, it made sense to do it while he was there. Within 5 minutes, Ryan had made me a rectangle from the large oak round. This would have taken a good few hours with a hewing axe. Stay tuned to see what I do with this in future episodes. And so that's it. The trees that I needed help with in my woodland have now been safely felled by Ryan. And thankfully, there is now no more need to fell any more trees in my woods, hopefully for the foreseeable future. Stay tuned to the next episode, where we begin to work on the giant ash tree, and I go through some of my thought process as to what I aim to do with it. Thank you for watching this episode. If you enjoy this type of content, feel free to hit the subscribe button and drop a comment below. If you would like to keep up to date with all of the episodes of My Woodland Life, then there is a link to the video playlist in the description box below. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.